Boa tarde a todos e todas. Vamos iniciar agora os trabalhos desta mesa, que vai tratar do tráfico de pessoas, propondo a liderança do IF20 para propor uma agenda de ação. Nós estamos aqui para discutir o tráfico de pessoas e o trabalho escravo contemporâneo, que é uma realidade presente em quase 100% dos países do planeta. Gostaríamos de convidá-los para também ouvir cada um de nossos palestrantes, mas também participar ativamente no final deste painel. Passo a palavra agora para o meu colega, também moderador, Nikitas, bispo.
Good afternoon to all of you, and thank you for being here. To be very honest, this room should be overflowing with people, because we're going to talk about one of the most critical issues and what is called an abomination upon the face of the earth. We're going to deal with the image and the icon of God, that which is being treated as a commodity. We are a panel, clergy, lay people, women, men, from various parts of the world, but coming together in harmony and unity to look at this problem. I am one of those people who believes that there's been enough conversation and enough words. And action speak louder than words. And faith without action is dead. And if we are people of faith, then we need to put our values, our ideas, our beliefs into action. And they need to be the embodiment of who we really are. So there are several things that I'd like to bring to your attention before we actually get going into the meat of the session. And we don't want to speak forever because we want to hear also from you. Now, there's one thing that I believe a communique will come out of this gathering, from this G20 interfaith gathering, convention, whatever we want to call it. But I think it's a family. And from this family, in the communique, we must speak of and address the issue of human trafficking and modern slavery. It's very good for politicians to say things, but it's more important for people of faith to bring them to the attention of the world, because we have more and larger audiences than the politicians do. And we can address and say things to the hearts of people. Now, a little bit later, you're going to hear a proposal. You're going to hear not a philosophy, not an ideology, not something impossible. You're going to hear a concrete proposal. And we also have to come to answer that question or that statement, put your money where your mouth is. And it's time that we put money and funds in the right places. I made a horrible comment perhaps the other day, but it was reminding me of a conversation when I had with politicians. And I said, there's one difference between all of you and us, the religious people and the politicians. We tell the truth. So now we want to push the politicians on things and make them speak the truth. There are some who are very good and loyal and truthful and honest, but we want to push things. And if we don't do it, who will do it? We are the voice for those who don't have a voice. We are those who speak for the oppressed. We are the voice of the children that are forced to work. We are the voice, the mouth, the hope of those people who are chained to beds, to chairs, or forced to work long hours. And human trafficking and modern slavery is not just about sexual life and sexual activity. It's about labor. It's about organ transplants. It's about all sorts of forced things. And we know it from Scripture. We know of Joseph, who was sold by his brothers. And then the nation of Israel was forced into labor. But I don't need to preach to all of you, because we're religious people and you know the Bible. I hope you do. But thank you for being with us. We're going to guide you together. We're a team. We're a family. And that's why we're here. And we're going to work together. And I know Kevin especially is going to give us some serious food for thought. Thank you very much. And God bless us. I won't say God bless you. God bless us. I want to include myself, because I need His grace and His blessings as well. Thank you.
Iniciando os trabalhos, eu gostaria de sugerir uma apresentação coletiva, apenas o nome de cada um e a organização que está aqui representando, e depois iniciamos as palestras sem que façamos essa parte. Então, gostaria de iniciar com o senhor. Por favor, diga seu nome, sua organização. Está certo?
Translation. Was it working?
It's working, but slowly.
Okay.
My name is Alistair Redfern. I'm a bishop in the Church of England, and I've been working on the issue of modern slavery in the UK and internationally for about 20 years, and I was involved in designing the legislation in the British Parliament.
My name is Kevin Hyland. I'm a former police officer from the UK who headed up the human trafficking teams at Scotland Yard. I was the first UK independent anti-slavery commissioner and Ireland's representative of the Council of Europe for Human Trafficking, and I am the strategic director for the Santa Marta Group, which is an organisation supported and created with Pope Francis.
Sou Márcia Leonora, sou professora universitária da Universidade Federal de Uberlandia e coordeno a Clínica de Enfrentamento ao Trabalho Escravo e o Programa Multidisciplinar Mais Humanos.
I am Archbishop Nikitas, the Greek Orthodox Archbishop of the United Kingdom, but I'm also the president of the Conference of European Churches, and I am the lead, I might say, for the Orthodox community in programs against human trafficking and modern slavery.
Eu sou irmã Rosa Elena, represento os religiosos do Brasil por meio da rede de Regis, Talitha e a rede Um Grito pela Vida. Eu sou mexicana, mas moro há muito tempo no Brasil.
Boa tarde, meu nome é José Monteiro, eu sou da organização Missão Internacional de Justiça, uma organização que busca proteger da violência aqueles que vivem em situações de pobreza pelo mundo, através do fortalecimento dos sistemas públicos de justiça. Vivo na Colômbia, em Bogotá, depois de ter passado 4 anos na República Dominicana, bom, e antes disso, por mais de 20 anos, na Polícia Brasileira.
So thank you. I've been asked to set the scene, as it were, and talk about the background and the plan that we are proposing as the interfaith community. Modern slavery and human trafficking constitutes one of the most lucrative serious crimes worldwide. However, more important is the damage caused to individuals, the targeting of the most vulnerable, the destruction of communities, and the threats to national and international security. The International Labour Organization and the UN estimate that the annual illicit profits total $236 billion US, while almost 50 million people are exploited. And including in that are 22,000 children who die every year in labour exploitation. Yet, identification of victims worldwide recorded by governments in 2023 was 133,900, and convictions were 7,115, meaning that only one in every 7,000 victims is likely to see justice through the criminal justice system. Here in the Western Hemisphere, from Canada down to Argentina, it's estimated there are 5.1 million victims of modern slavery and human trafficking. In 2023, the US State Department reported 18,292 victims were identified, and during the same period, there were 873 convictions, a shockingly low number. The global estimate is that all crime generates $2.2 trillion annually in criminal assets, which is similar or equal to more than half of the GDP of the G20 nations. 236 billion, or around 10% of the global crime and the money that's created from it, is done by human trafficking. The levels of impunity, as I've explained, and the money this crime generates show crime can pay, while victims' suffering goes unnoticed. And efforts need to become unrelenting in changing the paradigm of impunity and suffering. Identifying victims and prosecuting perpetrators are crucial, but like many global challenges, prevention has to be the goal. Prevention is defined as stopping something from happening or arising. And the criminal justice system so far on modern slavery has proven to be passive, lackluster, and unsophisticated, which not only permits this crime, but also contributes to it becoming a crime of choice. Global commitments to end modern slavery go back to the 1930 Convention of Forced Labour, and then the 1957 and the 2014 Forced Labour Protocols, and many other legislations in the ASEAN region, in the EU, in the Council of Europe, and the UN Declaration of Human Rights, the Rome Statute, and over 100 countries in the world have legislation criminalising human trafficking. In the recent G20 meetings since Argentina, human trafficking or modern slavery have been mentioned. In India it was mentioned, in Indonesia, in Italy, and in Japan, and Argentina, and of course Saudi Arabia. They've all made some commitment, some using the very plain terms: we will take action to eradicate child labour, forced labour, human trafficking and modern slavery in the world of work, including through fostering sustainable supply chains. That was included in the communique by leaders in 2020 in Saudi Arabia. Annual evaluations by the TIP office show that 13 countries are state-sponsored trafficking, and only 33 of the 188 countries evaluated every year by the United States State Department on trafficking, only 33 countries meet the minimum standards expected. And only 8 of that 33 are G20 countries. So the wealthiest countries in the world are not even meeting the minimum standards. Religious faith has historically been pivotal in ending slavery and human trafficking. British politician William Wilberforce spent many decades campaigning for the British Empire to ban slavery. In addition to being a parliamentarian, he was a Christian minister. And today, modern slavery and human trafficking exist for the very same reasons they did in his day, to reduce or eliminate labour costs or to exploit people as a commodity. These are always and have always been immoral acts, but nowadays, unlike before the 19th century, nowadays they are serious crimes in 188 countries. Yet it continues to flourish. So we need to see change. And there's 6 areas that I believe we need to prioritise. Government procurement should never fund human trafficking. Governments can prevent human trafficking and modern slavery in the money they spend. 20% of the world's money is spent by governments. Imagine if that was free of modern slavery and human trafficking. We also need to see businesses, supply chains, brought to account. We need to see them making sure that their business supply chains are not profiting from human trafficking or modern slavery. And in the EU, legislation has been passed that will be introduced by 2029, where there will be sanctions for companies who do not obey those rules. And those will be companies not just based in the EU, but globally. But I also think we need to create this idea of tainted money. Profit you make from modern slavery or human trafficking is up for grabs, taken from you and then used for reparation or in the fight against trafficking. So the victims can create their lives and start to build their independence. The third one we need is the internet needs to be governed by law, and technology, AI, needs to be governed by law. Why is it when something happens online, sometimes companies argue it's the freedom of speech, the freedom of expression? I've never heard the abuse of a child, the selling of a person, being allowed to be something that is exploitable and something that we can trade in. We need to use the international instruments we've got, and we need to identify the international bodies that can implement that. The World Bank, the World Health Organization, the IMF, and many other organizations, Interpol, Europol, and the list goes on. And of course, crucially, the G20. And we need to create leadership. We've heard about that all day, moral leadership. So what we're doing here is with the Interfaith Forum, we're looking to get a working group set up. A working group that will be reporting to the G20, telling them or instructing them or advising them or collaborating with them on what is needed, including the 6 points. But what we want to see to deliver those 6 points is by 2030, when we get to the point of when the SDGs come to their close, there is 30 billion invested every year by the G20 countries. At the moment, globally, the investment to fight this crime of 236 billion, almost 20% of all crime monies, is less than 1.5 billion. So it's an unfair fight. And as we as faith leaders, as we as the Interfaith Forum, can encourage and start to work through our working group to ensure that the G20 invests 30 billion by 2030 and every year thereafter, and increases as necessary, that 236 billion will reduce, the 50 million will reduce, and work will become something that pays. And we won't be using women as items for pleasure. We need to be able to do something that is robust, and we need to be making and working and asking the G20 to deliver. So, this is what we intend to do, to deliver SDG 8 and SDG 8.7. The 30 by 30 proposal, we believe, will achieve what we all want. But what does that look like? Well, it's about people getting jobs. It's about people having freedom. It's about people having their rights. And Pope Francis wrote to Prime Minister David Cameron, and he said, every economic and political theory of action must set about providing each inhabitant of the planet with the minimum wherewithal to live in dignity and freedom, with the possibility of supporting a family, educating children, praising God, and developing one's own human potential. This is the main thing. In the absence of such a vision, all economic activity is meaningless. And we can be the people, the Interfaith Forum, working with the G20, that we can actually deliver this as a reality and not just a theory that's in books and commitments that are nearly 100 years old. Thank you.
Agradeço a coordenação pela oportunidade de participar deste fórum interreligioso. Minha fala vai ser dividida em 2 momentos. Primeiro falarei sobre a Talitha, que é a rede internacional, e o segundo momento da Rede Um Grito pela Vida, que é a rede nacional do Brasil. Talitha é a rede internacional da vida consagrada católica contra o tráfico de pessoas, com o objetivo principal de combater esse mal que atinge a humanidade. O tráfico de pessoas é uma forma extrema e grave de violação dos direitos humanos caracterizada pela venda e compra de seres humanos, sendo literalmente um mercado de venda de gente, reduzindo a ser humano a mercadoria, violando os direitos mais fundamentais, como o direito à vida, à liberdade e à dignidade. Este mal se iguala à segunda prática ilegal mais rentável globalmente. Talitha faz parte da UISG, que é a União Internacional de Superiores Gerais, e coordena os esforços das irmãs para o combate ao tráfico de pessoas, facilitando o trabalho em rede, a comunicação e o treinamento, de acordo com o plano estratégico da UISG e os ensinamentos da doutrina social da Igreja Católica. É uma rede global que atua de forma descentralizada e colaborativa para combater o tráfico de pessoas. Sua estrutura flexível e sua presença profética em diversos países, nos 5 continentes, permitem que a rede adapte suas ações às diferentes realidades e desafios enfrentados pelas vítimas do tráfico humano. Os membros de Talitha são redes intercongregacionais lideradas por religiosas, organizadas principalmente em nível nacional, envolvendo homens e mulheres religiosos e todas as leigas e leigos de boa vontade que compartilham a visão das religiosas na luta contra o tráfico, orientados ao trabalho de bases, conectados com as conferências nacionais, Associação dos Superiores Maiores. A missão de Talitha é a prevenção, a proteção, a reintegração, a incidência política, a formação. A rede atua em diversos níveis, a nível local, nacional e internacional. Talitha tem o compromisso de trabalhar em solidariedade umas com as outras, dentro das próprias comunidades religiosas e nos países em que operam, nos 5 continentes, para combater persistentemente em todos os níveis o tráfico de pessoas, principalmente o abuso e a exploração sexual de mulheres e crianças, com especial atenção ao tráfico de mulheres, que se torna um comércio internacional muito lucrativo. A vida religiosa no Brasil está na luta contra o tráfico de pessoas como rede Um Grito pela Vida. A rede é um espaço de articulação e ação profética solidária, vinculada à Conferência dos Religiosos do Brasil. É composta aproximadamente por 250 pessoas, entre religiosas, alguns religiosos e diversas congregações, além de leigos e leigas. A rede, unindo forças contra o tráfico de pessoas, atua em mais de 30 núcleos em 22 estados, permitindo amplas alianças intercongregacionais em prol da vida ameaçada e ferida das pessoas traficadas e violentadas em seus direitos. Desenvolve um conjunto de atividades na prevenção, sensibilização, formação, informação, capacitação de multiplicadores, incidência política e denúncia desse crime grave contra a vida. A vida religiosa consagrada contra o mal do tráfico humano é uma missão desafiadora. Apesar das várias iniciativas de mobilização e sensibilização, ainda há uma necessidade urgente de maior visibilidade e conscientização sobre esta chaga que sofre a humanidade. Muitas vezes, esse problema é tratado como um assunto distante e de pouca relevância pela sociedade. Somos um grupo pequeno, composto maioritariamente por mulheres religiosas e leigas, que mesmo tendo outras áreas de missão, nos dedicamos com afinco para dar visibilidade ao crime de tráfico de pessoas. Nosso trabalho é totalmente voluntário, incluindo as coordenações, o que restringe o tempo disponível para desenvolver as atividades. A Regis não possui fundos financeiros próprios, depende de doação de parceiros do exterior. A rede Talitha da vida religiosa consagrada desempenha um papel importante na luta contra o tráfico humano, mas é preciso uma ação conjunta e abrangente entre Regis para enfrentar esse grave problema, que exige uma resposta coordenada e multifacetada que envolva todos os setores da sociedade. A colaboração entre a comunidade internacional, o governo, a sociedade civil, o setor privado, as diversas religiões. É fundamental e crucial esta ação dos diversos atores para erradicar essa prática e proteger os direitos humanos. Obrigada.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to give you a few pictures of some of my work and a little story. I work for the Church of England, a national church, trying to fight modern slavery, and we can work with local parishes and communities and raise awareness and open eyes. We can provide voluntary resources to the police and local government and people who don't have the resources to fulfill their responsibilities, and we can work with policymakers in Parliament so that we can learn from experience and adjust our legislation. And faith groups like us have the ability to convene meetings, to bring people into a space of goodness. People trust faith groups on the side of goodness normally, and help synergize the heart, the head, and what might be possible because we're learning from victims. If you think of the story of the Good Samaritan that was referred to in the plenary, the person who's commended as faithful is the one who noticed the one who was suffering. The religious people just scooted past because they were going to pray and sing hymns and do all their religious things. I think trafficking is the litmus test of whether religious faith has any value at all in the modern world. Because if we don't notice these millions of our brothers and sisters being tortured and oppressed, and we just get on with being religious or making statements, then our faith is worth very little at all, and certainly won't be fulfilling the gospels that we've inherited. I want to say something briefly about the Global Sustainability Network Kevin and I are involved in. On December the 2nd, 2014, the Pope got religious leaders together at the Vatican. We were privileged to be there. They signed a declaration against modern slavery. CNN said that the leaders represented 90% of the world's population. From that meeting, we set up the GSN, Global Sustainability Network, to pursue this agenda with the faith communities. But we're not just faith. We bring together faith leaders, government leaders, business people, media leaders, academia and the research element, and NGOs working on the ground. And it's the synergies between those things that give us wisdom and insight. We can teach different sectors, they can share, they can cooperate. That's having an enormous effect. And that's the kind of model that the G20 could emulate and really do on a huge scale, a massive scale. And the genius of Kevin's proposal, I think, is its simplicity. It's saying put some money where this need is and people want something to happen, but we're not telling them, each government, how to spend this money, because contexts are different. One of the first things I learned when I went into the British Parliament in the House of Lords, I spent all my life working with churches and NGOs and volunteers, is that the biggest problem to politics are NGOs and people of faith, because we all think we know the answer, we have perfect solutions. Politics isn't about perfect solutions. It's about, as Paul will know in New South Wales, what is possible to get people to agree to do to make some difference and make it happen. And that requires compromise and just pushing things over the line, even if it's less than you would want in your heart or think your faith demands. The G20 is a space where that kind of real politics could happen. Through the members, learning together, a group coordinating what's going on, helping them share, helping them have a vision, and as people make a real difference in their own context, in their own government, in their own legislation, in their own prosecution, there'll be good news for people on the ground, and together we'll take this thing forward for a tiny sum of money. 30 billion is nothing for the ecologists of this government. Let me just finish with a story. I've got a friend called Diane. She was, as a teenager in the north of England, she was a bit wild. She went down to London and got caught up in the sex trade. She was taken to the Middle East and kept in a brothel for 6 years. After 6 years, she escaped, she's come back. She helps me in some of my work. One thing she says when she shares her story is, for 6 years, she was living this charade of us modern people, that you do what you like, with who you like, when you like, and that's what grown-up people do. She said, for 6 years, nobody ever asked me how I was. Nobody cared. We, my friends, are equally indifferent if we're not asking, how are these people? Where are they? How can we mobilise resources, energies, political will to start looking, noticing, like the Good Samaritan? And the thing about the Good Samaritan is, not only did he delay going to church to say his prayers to rescue somebody, but he set up a system. He found an innkeeper who's an expert on hospitality and who looked after the person. And he just put some money. This is a model for the G20. Find some innkeepers, invest in those people, come occasionally and check how they're getting on, but transform the life of a brother or a sister who's been brutalised and abused, and people would never ask them how they are because they're out of sight and out of mind. This is an amazing moment for the G20 to step into a proper political space, to do some proper political work and make a difference to so many of our brothers and sisters who are without hope and hurting. Thank you.
Ok, boa tarde. Eu queria acrescentar alguns pensamentos a respeito daquilo que foi dito hoje, porque eu queria tratar a questão do tráfico de pessoas talvez de um ponto de vista um pouco distinto, a partir de algumas realidades que eu acho que todos concordamos aqui a respeito das sociedades em que vivemos. A primeira conclusão é de que nós vivemos em sociedades enfermas. Pela quantidade, se nós temos 50 milhões de pessoas traficadas no mundo, e se esse problema persiste por tanto tempo, e se há tantas organizações criminosas trabalhando ou atuando nessa área, é porque, de alguma maneira, nossas sociedades estão enfermas, porque permitem que esse fenômeno aconteça até hoje. Além disso, nós temos que admitir também a situação nos países, em especial nos países que são países de origem, que são os países mais pobres, em que a desigualdade social é uma das principais causas que levam as pessoas a serem vítimas do tráfico de pessoas. E aí a gente pode falar sobre as causas sociais que levam a isso, mas isso é algo que atinge o país como um todo, em todas as dimensões das suas políticas públicas. Mas eu quero falar de uma em especial, que é algo muito comum, é algo muito corriqueiro, exatamente nesses países que, em geral, são a fonte para essas vítimas que são exploradas no mundo inteiro, e é a questão da impunidade. Nós temos que encarar a questão da impunidade dos nossos países como uma das principais causas que levam a esse exagerado número de vítimas pelo mundo. Eu tenho trabalhado em alguns países da América Latina e em todos os países acontece o mesmo. E como combater esse mal? Então, como a gente olha para esses sistemas públicos de justiça, que muitas vezes estão precários, muitas vezes não têm o conhecimento, muitas vezes não têm as ferramentas para lidar tanto com a investigação quanto com a persecução desse crime. Então, a minha proposta e a proposta da minha organização, segundo a teoria de câmbio que nós temos, é que sem combater a impunidade, nós não vamos combater a violência. E sem fortalecer os sistemas públicos de justiça, em todos esses países, isso não será possível. Porque ainda com os poucos recursos que nós temos, por exemplo, para o sistema de justiça trabalhar, nós ainda assim desperdiçamos esse recurso porque não temos, por exemplo, os recursos humanos capacitados para fazer isso. E é isso que a minha organização faz ao redor do mundo, é tentar ajudar os governos a fortalecer o seu sistema de justiça. Eu me lembro de um caso muito emblemático que houve na República Dominicana, onde um cidadão francês de 70 anos foi preso, acusado exatamente de tráfico de pessoas, exploração sexual de crianças, e em frente ao juiz ele diz: What should I do? What else should I do with my money? O que mais eu posso fazer com o meu dinheiro? O que mais eu poderia fazer com o meu dinheiro? Então, essa é a normalização que nós vemos, então, da sociedade em si. Então, por um lado, nós temos que fortalecer o sistema de justiça, os sistemas de atenção e proteção à vítima. Por outro lado, nós temos que elevar a consciência da sociedade em geral a respeito desse tipo de crime, porque esse tipo de crime é muito normalizado. Então, e por outro lado, como terceiro ponto, temos que fazer uma avaliação nesses países a respeito da necessidade, da eventual necessidade de atualização dos nossos marcos legais. Temos muitos países na região aqui, por exemplo, na região da América Latina, onde as leis contra o tráfico de pessoas são dos anos 2000, 2005, onde a internet, onde o problema, por exemplo, dos crimes sexuais através da internet, onde, por exemplo, o tráfico de pessoas através da internet ainda não era uma realidade tão comum como a gente tem hoje. Então, também é uma proposta que nós possamos atuar nessa área da atualização dos marcos legais. As Nações Unidas possuem um modelo de lei que pode propor aos países e, a partir de então, pode atualizar segundo as características de cada um dos países. Nós também devemos olhar para as pessoas que são vítimas nesse processo, porque em muitos dos nossos sistemas de justiça, o centro do processo é o criminoso. O centro do processo é aquele que tem mais direitos. E uma vez, quer dizer, os criminosos merecem toda a atenção legal, merecem que sejam respeitados todos os seus direitos humanos, mas o centro do processo penal precisa ser a vítima. Ela que precisa ser reparada, e não somente através da retribuição criminal que esse criminoso sofre, mas também por uma reparação civil, porque a vida dessas pessoas para, os traumas continuam, as pessoas ficam desempregadas, e então a gente consegue perceber que não só o fato em si do tráfico de pessoas já é uma tragédia, mas as suas consequências para aquelas pessoas, em especial as mulheres que sofrem esse tipo de crime ou esse tipo de violência, têm suas vidas despedaçadas e necessitam passar por um processo de reparação psicoterapêutica, mas também uma reparação civil, para que possa seguir com suas vidas. Então, para finalizar, eu gosto muito dessa frase, propondo a liderança do IF20 para propor uma agenda de ação no que diz respeito ao tráfico de pessoas, porque, segundo os dados oficiais, falando a respeito da sociedade global, 63% de nós, seres humanos, nos declaramos religiosos. Não quer dizer que os outros 37% sejam ateus, 11% se declaram ateus. Então, se nós, como grupo de entidades e tradições religiosas que representamos 63% das pessoas do mundo, se nós não tivermos a legitimidade e se nós não tivermos a coragem de propor esse tipo de ação, não há outro grupo humano que pudesse ser mais capaz de fazer isso por nós. Então, que nós possamos incentivar os governos. Nós, como sociedade civil, somos muito pequenos, temos poucos recursos, então nós temos que ser, e esse grupo do IF20 também, temos que ser catalisadores para incidir nos governos, para que os governos, então, cumpram as suas responsabilidades. Porque, ao fim e ao cabo, e no fim do dia, a responsabilidade da luta contra o tráfico de pessoas é fundamentalmente do governo. E se o governo não atua de maneira adequada, não será a sociedade civil e não será a nossa sociedade de tradições religiosas que será capaz de combater esse mal, porque simplesmente não temos recursos para tanto. Então, que nós possamos levar essa mensagem aos membros do G20, que nós possamos levar essa mensagem de esperança de um lado, mas também de exigência, que a sociedade civil e a sociedade composta pelas tradições religiosas representadas aqui exigem dos líderes do G20 que olhem para essa parcela da sociedade que está sofrendo por causa do tráfico de pessoas. Muito obrigado.
Ouvimos atentamente cada um dos palestrantes e é bastante importante compreender que há também frase emblemática deste fórum, que é não deixar ninguém para trás, significa que não vamos falhar, né? Deixar alguém para trás seria esquecer e trabalhar apenas com prevenção, proteção e reintegração de vítimas, sem resolver ou trabalhar com o problema real, com a questão real, que são políticas públicas, que são sistemas de justiça que funcionem, que o crime de tráfico de pessoas e o trabalho escravo contemporâneo não seja mais um crime que compensa, né, que custa pouco para quem faz, que não existe punição. Então, seria muito importante também que essas comunidades religiosas aqui presentes, que elas possam também continuar prestando valoroso trabalho de filantropia, de assistência, de acolhimento, de capacitação, mas que nós também possamos exigir, né, que existam investimentos concretos por parte dos governos e que este fórum, até a concretização da Agenda 2030, né, então, em 6 anos, consiga progredir, consiga avançar nas metas estabelecidas pela ODS 8. Então, eu acho que aqui nós tivemos várias possibilidades, né, vários intentos e várias saídas que foram apontadas para a prevenção, para resgate, reabilitação, colaboração multissetorial, advocacy e influência em sistemas de justiça e em governo. Eu fico bastante feliz e gostaria de ouvi-los. Antes, passo a palavra para o meu colega arcebispo Nikitas, né, que vai também falar suas impressões e depois formulamos questões para os palestrantes e franqueamos a palavra para todos que estão presentes.
Thank you, Márcia. And to the panelists who spoke, I'd like to tell you a story to set the stage and then to make one comment. In the Orthodox tradition, we have the sacrament of confession. And an elderly woman went to the priest for confession. And she said, "Father, now that I'm toward the end of my life, I want to know what will happen to me." And she began to tell him, "I never stole from anyone. I never cheated on my husband. I never wanted anything that wasn't mine." And she went down the list of the things she did not do. She then looked to the priest and said, "What will happen to me?" And he looked at her and said, "I'm sorry to tell you this, you'll probably go straight to hell." And of course she was horrified. And he said, "Life is not about what you don't do. Life is about what you do." That's why the greatest sin may be that of indifference. And if we don't act as religious communities, as human beings, we are guilty of indifference. And when good people do not act, evil happens. And we will let evil happen. So that's the story. Now the statement. Number one, we all have to demand that in the communiqué, human trafficking, modern slavery are mentioned. There cannot be a communiqué coming out of here that doesn't mention the real problem of the world. Everybody can talk about finances, but we want to talk about the human being, the person. And then number two, there is a proposal. Kevin mentioned something. It needs support. Historically, 100 years ago, Orthodox and Catholics didn't speak. The Anglicans kept a distance from both of us. The Church of Latter-day Saints was in its own isolation. We didn't talk with Jews or Muslims, but we're all here now together. God has given us the opportunity to act. And if we don't, we are indifferent to God's commandment that is coming before us. I think now we'd like to hear from you. Maybe you have questions or comments.
Here's a mic.
Good afternoon. I want to thank the panel very much for the presentation this afternoon. It's very interesting to hear what is going on. My name is Neil Bacchus, and I'm from Guyana, which is a next door neighbor to Brazil. And I'm very pleased to share with you this afternoon that Guyana updated its Anti-Trafficking Person Act last year and has one of the best legislation right now in the Caribbean and perhaps in the Latin America. For the last 8 years, we've been a Tier 1 country under the U.S. State Department. I'm the secretary of the Interreligious Organization, and I participated in 2 regional conferences by a global NGO called Free the Slaves. I don't know if you've heard about it, but they have been taking the fight against TIP across the world, and they had 2 regional conferences in the Caribbean last year and this year. And outcome to those conferences, they recognize the importance of taking the Constitution forward from a Caribbean perspective. So a Caribbean coalition against trafficking in person was launched on July 31st this year to continue this work against trafficking in person. I am the first convener at present for that coalition, so I welcome the opportunity to be part of moving forward with the IF leadership in terms of taking the fight against TIP. We recognize also that the religious community has a role to play. So through that forum, when I return back home, we will be doing a survey with the religious community to find out about gaps regarding their knowledge of trafficking in person, and then provide a training for them in terms of moving towards preventative measure. And the religious community has an important role to play because throughout the presentation, we heard about the victim and the survivor. What about those who participated in those acts? In Guyana, we have a problem where when persons who are being alleged to be trafficked, eventually they evolve into commercial sex. And those men who participate in commercial sex, what is the church doing to guide them about their ethical behavior? So there's work for all of us, and we welcome this activity today. Thank you so much.
Eu vou sugerir para fazermos um bloco de perguntas e depois franqueamos as respostas para as pessoas da mesa.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Archbishop Nikitas. I'm Pastor Paul Green, Chairman of Slave Check Foundation, and this is my wife, Michelle. And we've travelled 15,000 kilometres today from Australia to come to Brasilia to ask our question right now. For your information, in Australia, I was a former politician, in the New South Wales Legislative Council, and I was fortunately able to use my faith and practice to author Australia's first modern slavery laws in New South Wales. Can I also at this time acknowledge the panel for your work in anti-human trafficking and modern slavery initiatives. I know that you're putting your heart and soul in it, and you're to be applauded for your efforts, but there's still more to be done. As a person of deep faith and a politician, I had a duty to use my power, and my political power particularly, for the powerless, my voice for the voiceless, by bringing both faith and governance together to set legislation in place to help and protect the most vulnerable of people, while also prospering the many people and constituents across our state. But today, Madam Chair, I represent 50+ million people caught up in the cycle of modern slavery and slavery-like practices and exploitation. Friends, if we counted these victims as a nation in their own right numerically, they would rate as the 27th largest nation on earth. Gosh. That is a sobering thought. A population that basically would be nearly twice my Australians' population in slavery and exploitation. It's simply shameful. At the current rate, sadly, approximately 5,000 victims, men, women and children, are still being added to the terrible statistics on a daily basis. Unfortunately, evil knows no bounds. Therefore, Madam Chair, I believe we are failing dramatically in achieving the SDG 8.7 goal. Friends, where are the political leaders of our global government? Where are they while these people have been exploited? Where are they? It seems to me if the G20 doesn't drive the SDG 8.7 resolution, who will? Friends, today I believe we urgently need to change our tactics to get the SDG 8.7 back on track and eradicate slavery in all its forms by 2030. That is 6 short years. I'm calling for renewed action. The plan announced earlier by Kevin Hyland in the plenary session 4, the 30 by 30 plan as we know it at the moment. In my humble opinion, I believe that the G20 Interfaith Forum is the appropriate place, appropriate powerful political force and the vehicle that can lead the way to eradicate modern slavery and human trafficking and reach our SDG 8.7 outcome using this 30 by 30 plan. Surely the G20 Interfaith Forum will embrace this plan to help lift these forgotten people out of exploitation and slavery. I believe the G20 Interfaith Forum needs to drive the change we want to see globally if we truly are to leave no one behind. In conclusion, Madam Chair, my question today is for the panel. What will we be doing today, with all due respect, Mr. President, on your watch, our watch? What will we be doing today? Will we set a blueprint up for the future generations to experience a world free from exploitation and slavery? Or to put it more simply, what will we be doing today to leave our world a better place for those who are following us and those yet to come? I highly endorse the agenda that we have to change the future, and I hope that everyone will be unanimous that we walk out here with a communique that will change the world. Thank you.
Thank you.
Boa tarde, eu sou Natália, estou representando um grupo interreligioso, basicamente na vertente educacional. Eu sou educadora E trabalhei um pouco na minha atividade profissional com a questão do tráfico humano, onde encontrei esse título geral, mas encontrei também o específico, tráfico de órgãos, tráfico, são coisas tenebrosas, mas eu tenho que falar. Além do tráfico de órgãos, tráfico de peças humanas para pesquisas e etc. Muito bem. A minha colocação, vocês têm todos uma experiência, vamos dizer, real, né? Eu apenas trabalhei nas análises e fornecimento de informação para os órgãos decisores, né? O que eu percebo é que nós estamos nos preocupando com todo o direito das vítimas. A ênfase é muito grande nas vítimas. E a nossa estratégia relacionada ao demandante, ao mercado, que é um mercado, é uma coisa de grana, de economia, enfim, né? E é uma exploração, vamos dizer, absolutamente imensa e profunda e maléfica, porque, né, junto com isso vem uma série de coisas, né? Nós temos máfias da droga, temos outro tipo de máfias que, no fim, formam um grande conjunto, vamos dizer, um grande conjunto de maldades, vamos dizer assim, né? Enquanto que versus o nosso humanismo, eu ainda acho que o nosso humanismo está muito fraco, desculpa. Mas eu acho que a gente devia traçar algumas estratégias. Vocês conhecem bem, eu acho, esse mercado, e a gente sabe que são grandes conglomerados e que são pessoas com muito poder nesse mundo, que são meio que os maestros dessa questão, né? Não dá para a gente se enganar. A gente analisa, estuda e vai parar sempre em alguns nichos. Então, assim, eu não tenho solução. Eu apenas gostaria de saber, primeiro, se eu estou falando alguma coisa que é lógica, mas, diante de tudo que eu já vi, eu achei interessante registrar a questão do mercado. Como não sei se a religião, porque esse mercado também tem muita gente religiosa, vocês sabem disso. Então, eu não sei se a religião, só ela, tem condição de impactar alguma coisa. Então, nós temos que realmente pensar numa estratégia mais forte. Obrigada.
Is there anyone else to speak?
So I just want to, as president of this organization, I want to go on record as being very much in favor of the proposal that we come up with a concrete working group that can work forward. I have picked up on Kevin Hyland's work the first time he came in Argentina. I apologize that I'm a little slow picking up on things. It's not that I haven't, I think I've been supportive every year. But I've got to tell you, it's hard to raise the money to do this conference every year. and adding the trivial number of $30 million sounds like a huge number to me. So let me tell you, in a way, I don't think a communique is important. Because who reads them? What we need to find, it's not that I'm against it, it's just that I have some skepticism, because what we're thinking about doing, we want in the next 5 weeks after this session, we're going to do some webinars. One of the webinars, I trust, will be on trafficking. So you're right, this room should be full. We've done a pretty good job of getting the auditorium full. I don't know where all the people are going. It is late in the afternoon, and there are a lot of very good sessions going on right now. But I think one of the things, the questions for me are things like, number one, who do we apply for the funding from?
Yeah.
So, and I know Kevin has been meeting with officials in different countries. We need to know who to approach in each of the G20 countries.
Yeah.
It has to be very concrete because there are people, I think, in most of the countries. I don't know what to think about China, I'm sorry, but there are problems. But I think we should sit down, systematically look at the G20 countries and maybe a few others that would be helpful and friendly. And so who are these lists and who are the specific people? Now that means we need to have some people who can help look for these people. Kevin's been doing a pretty good job. He can't do it alone. To the extent we have a network of organizations, we need to know who those organizations are and how we can tap into them. I hear the numbers are staggering, but I have to admit, I haven't seen actual cases. Now that's just my quiet, nice life in Happy Valley in Provo, Utah. But I know that these problems are everywhere. But we need help figuring out which problems do we prioritize. I listened to the low numbers of prosecutions. I mean, I used to teach criminal law. And one of the staggering things you see at the beginning of criminal law, you see the total number of crimes and then this little filter, and it comes down to a tiny number of prosecutions. And it's not just in trafficking, it's everywhere. And then you think about how much a trial costs or an actual prosecution. Something in the United States, something like 95% of cases are done by plea bargaining. Thank goodness, because we wouldn't be able to deal with the volume of crime otherwise. So and Kevin has been in a wonderful position to, because of his background with police work, his background with government work and lobbying, but we need to, we need to multiply Kevin if we can. I don't have an obvious answer to how we do that. But I think there are people in each country who, because this is an issue that will mobilize people. I'll tell you a true confession from Argentina. We had someone who was really trying to upgrade our publicity, and she said, trafficking, this is a really mediagenic issue. I feel a little bit guilty about it, but it's true, it is. Yeah. This is something that people get.
Yeah.
They don't understand the full ramifications of the issue. They don't. They hear about the sex side of things. They don't hear about the other kinds of slavery and so forth. But we need to be able to really find ways to make it more concrete. Sure. And I know this panel is better at it than anyone I know. So I'm very grateful. But I want you to know there's a sincere will on the part of my part, on the part of the other leaders of this organization, to make this really an impact area. So we want to do everything we can. We're a little nervous about, can we take, we've got a number of working groups, some of which are effective, some of which we need people and funds. But I think this is one that really needs to take priority, and I want you to know that I certainly stand behind. I think Kevin knows that. I hope the rest of you know that. And Archbishop Nikitas, if you think a communique will help, I just imagine writing a communique and sending it to Donald Trump. This is what made me, I realize there's some other leaders that actually read things that come into them. But what's really important is that those of us, I mean, the real power of this organization, part is it's a platform that gets visible. Yes. But the other thing is it gets people who are really concerned and who know how to be effective, and then this gets carried down to the grassroots. And we've got to find the way. We've got to have a working group, and we'll need volunteers, we'll need money.
Yeah.
But tell us where to go, and we'll try to go there.
Thank you, Cole.
Can I just say something real quickly to Cole about the communique? Number one, you never know who's going to read it. And if you post it in as many places as possible, you may touch people. But more important than that, those who see it will say, these people actually care, and they're trying to do good. That's what's important. They're trying to live their faith.
Okay, I have a question, and I'm not with any organization. My husband's the general counsel, and he listens to me, so I'm going to ask a question. Are there any kind of education programs in schools and so forth to help children recognize trafficked people? I've heard of this. Is this part of your agenda?
Yep. Shall I? Certainly the organisation I work in, the Clear Initiative in the UK, we do a lot of work with schools. We provide awareness raising materials. A very important strategy, we use our churches and cathedrals to have art exhibitions about slavery. And the school has to do some research. They love coming to these lovely spaces to see their work displayed. And it's very moving to see how young people try and say something about chains or whatever. In some regions of our country, the local authority who are responsible for education have put modern slavery on the curriculum. So we're getting, and then we do a lot of work with teenagers. We have a great problem with drug running and teenagers being the mules who take the things. And we do a lot of training, not just for young people, but for parents and for grandparents and for carers. So there are some models. A lot of our stuff's online. You could look at it and see how it's done.
Thank you. I just want to touch on Cole's point first and to say I think the magic of this is we need to keep it simple. And what we will be doing is we will not be taking a pot of money and counting the money and distributing it. It will be us saying to governments, this is the size of your problem, and that data generally exists. This has come from State Department, it's come from the ILO, come from the UN, come from their own reports. In Europe, come from the Council of Europe or the EU. And the size of the issue you're dealing with, for example, the United States at the moment allocates about 100 billion every year in the fight against drugs. Last year, federal government allocated about 257 million in the fight against trafficking. And so we need to start spelling out to them and showing them. And when I meet with people senior in governments, including the US, the UK, or wherever, and I say, do you know this contributes to 20% of the world's economic crime? They're shocked. And I think that's the process that we have. We tell them, we educate them, and then they realize by doing this. And so then we start clocking up and registering. You're now spending 1 billion. You're now spending 2. And look at the returns you got from that. And in the EU, for example, Ireland recently fined TikTok for data protection breaches. So for not behaving properly with people's data. TikTok were fined 1.4 billion euros. 1.4 billion. Now, if we start looking at other ways, Cole, and you're absolutely right, the criminal justice system is a slow machine, it's cumbersome, but if we can start looking at other ways of governance of the internet, other ways that hold companies to account, like the new EU legislation, the new German laws, the new Canadian laws, the Australian laws, the British laws, and we start implementing that globally, that will naturally attract money from sanctions, it will attract a drive towards achieving slavery-free activities, and that will then contribute to the 30 billion. So the 30 billion isn't going to be a pot that sits in the US or in the UK or wherever. It's going to be an adding up, and to say, when we get to 2030, even if we only get to 18 billion, it's 17 billion more than now. And so I think it's a process that we are the guardians of, as opposed to us taking the responsibility for. To your question around training, The former First Lady of Louisiana, Donna Edwards, is a teacher. She's developed a project, a program, and she developed this network called First Spouses, because now, obviously, first spouses are not first ladies all the time, which is a great step forward, that governors are now women as well. And she set up this network and has done a program across Louisiana and into the southern states now. And she's now also developed one with the NFL for the Super Bowl. And I know there's been projects that have chased the Super Bowl, but she's doing one with the NFL that will preempt and plan ahead, the kind of things that we would like to see. But also now, and I've worked with her actually this week while I've been here, they're developing one for the World Cup that's going to be in North America with FIFA. So this kind of structure, infrastructure, and of course all of this will contribute to the 30 billion, because the states, or the federal for the FIFA, and FIFA themselves are going to have to contribute to this. So it's a lot more than just sitting there and saying, you know, we're checking the tills every day, how much is coming in. We're not going to go around to countries and say, you know, we want, you know, it's not like normal donor things at the UN. This is more about us encouraging them. And the UK, for example, in its report, disclosed that it spent 40 million on trafficking over the last 6 or 7 years, thinking from the Home Office that was going to be seen as wonderful. Of course, when I'm there and I'm talking about it, I said, this is a disgrace. You spent more on the security for one minister or 2 ministers. And when the public hear it like that, the governments then have to pivot and say, we need to invest. So that's the approach. Thank you.
In regards to just education, we have 5 Sundays of Lent. So we picked 5 forms of trafficking with a biblical passage, a story with questions for discussion. And we included the slavery to sin, which is usually omitted in the whole group. And it's being translated now from English into Greek, and it'll go into United States and Greece.
Da nossa parte, como universidade, nós também investimos em 2 projetos e visitamos escolas públicas e privadas, né, desde o ensino fundamental até a conclusão do ensino médio, mas a intenção da clínica dentro de uma faculdade de direito é formar pessoas com sensibilidade, pessoas que vão ser advogados, juízes, procuradores, policiais, e que vão exercer papéis dentro deste sistema de justiça, porque dos 60 mil resgatados no trabalho escravo no Brasil, de 2005 até hoje, nós tivemos menos de 10 pessoas presas pelo crime que cometeram. Então, empresas e empregadores que escravizam pessoas contam com a impunidade, e a impunidade é algo que os juízes acabam espalhando, porque não compreendem a diferença entre degradância de um trabalho e a pobreza. Então, não condenam, acham que é algo normal.
Nós, em questão da educação, como Talitha, nós somos uma rede de redes. E nós somos, em total, 6.000 pessoas que estamos nestas redes, 58 redes, e somos em 97 países. E o principal que a gente tem como princípio é a prevenção, a conscientização e a incidência política. E nisso, a gente, em todos os países, tentamos estar dentro dos meios educacionais. A vida religiosa consagrada trabalha com a educação, então nós fazemos questão de preparar material, diferentes materiais que a gente tem, né, a tráfico de pessoas, onde colocamos informação, fazemos também os folders e cartilhas e bastante material didático para poder trabalhar nas escolas. também nas universidades, não só nas escolas católicas, vamos também nas escolas do governo, e tentamos que isso seja o nosso trabalho, é fazer essa conscientização, porque acreditamos que a prevenção é principal para não cair as pessoas nesse mal. Porque, em realidade, quando a gente vai falar sobre o tráfico de pessoas, é um mal muito oculto. As pessoas não querem falar. Quando começamos a falar, começam a dizer, aconteceu isto, desapareceu, foi isto, foi o outro, e vai identificando que existe o tráfico em todo lugar. Está dentro de casa, porque os aliciadores estão dentro de casa, são próximos. Então, em questão da educação, a gente tenta fazer o nosso trabalho na educação. Na questão que falava o senhor, eu fico muito feliz de escutar que nós precisamos ter prioridade. A gente não está priorizando este mal. Eu, no início, falava, né, que a sala deveria estar cheia em questão de interesse da questão. E tem poucas pessoas, por quê? Porque é um mal que não é reconhecido, né? Então, eu fico feliz disso, de saber que estão interessados em poder investir mais e poder dar atenção a este mal que está acabando com a humanidade, porque está violando os direitos humanos em todos os sentidos.
Ok, rapidamente, eu sei que estou consciente do tempo aqui, já estouramos o tempo. Eu acho que essa questão da educação é uma excelente questão para se tratar aqui num ambiente como esse. Por quê? Porque em muitos dos nossos países, os governos não permitem que esse tipo de coisa seja tratado nas escolas. Por quê? Porque, sempre que a gente trata nas escolas de alguns países sobre temas que estão muito próximos à exploração sexual, o abuso sexual, há muita resistência em alguns governos para que isso seja ministrado a nível de escolas. Porque aqui há, por exemplo, 2 iniciativas muito interessantes de pessoas e organizações que vão até as escolas para ministrar esse tipo de conteúdo, mas não é sustentável. A única maneira de que a gente pode fazer esse processo ser sustentável é através da inclusão permanente nos currículos de formação das nossas crianças e adolescentes. E isso não é possível, muitas vezes, em razão, inclusive, de posições de tradições religiosas. Então, que as nossas tradições, a nossa fé, não sejam um impeditivo ou não sejam um catalisador para um preconceito sobre um assunto a ser ministrado nas escolas. Porque é um assunto importante e é importante que em especial, nossas garotas e garotos nas escolas tenham conhecimento para evitar que sejam vítimas desse tipo de crime. Porque se nós não fazemos em casa, onde deveria também haver essa educação, bom, ao menos na escola deveríamos ter isso como algo obrigatório, mas ainda há muito preconceito, a gente tem que lutar contra isso.
The session has come to an end. Thank you all very, very much. To the panelists, to Márcia for her kindness and her work, and let's move forward and do the right thing.